Welcome to JAMA AI Conversations. I'm Roy Perlis, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA AI, and I'm pleased to welcome today's guest, Ajamete Kaykas, Chief Exploration Officer and Head of Neuroscience at Insitro. Insitro describes itself as a machine learning-enabled drug discovery and development company, integrating large-scale human data, automated cell-based models, and AI. So today I want to dig into what that actually looks like in practice and when and how we might expect those kinds of technologies, especially those incorporating AI, to really begin to impact drug discovery pipelines. So Aj, thanks for joining us.
Roy, thanks for having me. Really a pleasure to be here and really nice to see you again.
It is nice. We collaborated in one of your former roles, and that's how I know that you are a perfect guest for this discussion. Just to start with, so the website says you decode the complexities of biology with machine learning and data at scale. Can you say a little bit about what Insitro actually does and the kind of processes that you have set up there?
Yeah, happy to describe. So we actually have three major platforms at Insitro. One is what we call ClinML, which actually takes human data and uses that to discover genetic drivers of disease, mining things like UK Biobank and using machine learning to refine the phenotypes. So that's one platform. The second platform we call CellML. And CellML is really what you were describing with doing perturbations of genes on cells at scale, using automation. It's really our major wet lab component. And we use a lot of machine learning to define it like a disease axis, in a dish, and then use that to screen for genetic drivers. Oftentimes, the CellML and the ClinML work together to really help us come up with the best targets that we want to then move forward. And the last platform we have is something we called ChemML, and that's a platform that uses DNA-encoded libraries to target specific proteins. Those targets often come out of the CellML and ClinML work that we do. And we put those together to really drive our discovery engine.
So I imagine at this point, a lot of the big pharmas have similar kinds of AI efforts. What do you see as the secret sauce here? What is it? How are you trying to be different in what you do?
Yeah, no, that's a really astute observation. Many pharma companies are using machine learning and AI, and they have similar platforms. I would say we're kind of an AI machine learning first company, and so we've built this from the ground up. It's hard to build that infrastructure and have everything integrated. And I'd say part of it is the integration of the data and having it be that, all of our data pipelines, all of the infrastructure really puts everything in a common structure and a common database. And that's very hard to do if you're a big company, which has lots of silos and different groups. And so we've really tried to integrate things from the start, which I'd say is one of our advantages. I'd say the other advantage is really around the integration of the people. We've got people that are really bilingual. They speak machine learning and data science and computational biology and biology. And we've really made sure that we put the biologist and the computational people together and have them work very, very closely together and really integrated. And that's a very important thing that you need to do from the ground up. It's very hard to do that post hoc, where you're actually asking people to work together when they're kind of siloed. And so that is, again, another real advantage of Insitro is that this has been done from the start versus having to force it post hoc.
So I want to come back to that phenotype because it's not trivial to find folks with both kinds of expertise or to get folks with those expertises to talk to each other in a language that they can understand. So I want to come back to that. But I want to ask you first, on the data generation side, so you and I both come out of genetics or have done work in genetics where I think the fantasy is you just download data from the internet and with sufficiently complex machine learning, the answer falls out. Right? Data is something you get from the internet. But it seems like you guys are generating a lot of data. Can you talk about how you balance that, like download from the internet versus we got to grow it ourselves?
Yeah, great question. So there are certain things that you can download from the internet. And, there are, large scale data sets which are publicly available, things like UK Biobank. There are other large scale data resources that you can get. Those you can download, you can mine those, but as you say, they're kind of limited. They give you a certain amount of insight, but they're limited. It's also not like when you download them and you analyze them, it's magic. There's a lot of iteration. You have to have humans in the loop where they're thinking through what the right question is to ask, how you actually interpret what you've got out of it. So I'd say we've been pretty successful at using some of those public data at Insitro, but I'd say another very important aspect of Insitro is that we generate our own data. And we do that because, as you say, like there's not enough data out there. It's also hard to interpret, and we need more control over the data that we're generating. So that's why we built, really the ability to perturb cells at scale. And with CRISPR, that's the kind of modality that we use. We've generated lots of high-dimensional data on those perturbed cells and use that for modeling disease. And we definitely need control over that. You need to kind of understand what you put into the experiment. You need to know all the variables. You need to have all of the metadata captured so that you can actually, really interpret what you're finding out the back end. And you need to be very rigorous about how you do that. When you get data from the internet, you don't know all of the information. You don't know how rigorous the data is. Things like UK Biobank, that's pretty rigorous in terms of how they capture the data. So that's a good data source. But downloading, say, a CRISPR screen that's been done from an academic lab, there's some value in that, but you also don't know all the challenges with that data. We have gone beyond that and really collected our own data and focused on the data quality. And that's something that I feel very strongly about.
So can you say a little bit more about the kinds of things that you do measure? Like what comes out the other side? And how is it different from the sort of CRISPR screen that an academic lab might run?
Yep. So, in some sense, there are definitely academic labs that are doing similar work to us. We're more focused on really having translatable systems, being able to use that for target and drug discovery. We have a keen focus on that. But in terms of the data that comes out, we capture high-dimensional data. And so we've focused a lot on things like imaging, looking at overall cell morphology or overall cell features, and that's very high-dimensional data. Machine learning loves high-dimensional data, and that's an area where I'd say machine learning shines because humans have a hard time with high-dimensional data. If you've got a vector of 100,000 features or 20,000 genes, it's very hard for humans to kind of understand what that is, and so you can definitely use machine learning to help recognize patterns within that data. But yeah, I'd say we've really focused on capturing high-dimensional data in cells.
So I want to jump ahead for a minute and ask, this sounds like it makes a ton of sense. We hear a lot about how AI is changing or going to change drug discovery. But at least so far, it's not as though, as far as we can tell, there's a big explosion in the pipelines. Is that just because I'm too impatient, or are people doing it wrong, or why haven't we solved this already?
I think there's kind of an initial cycle of excitement. This happens with any new technology, and with machine learning and AI, there's definitely been a big excitement, but it takes a long time for these things to really come to fruition. And I'd say we're just at the beginning of this adventure. We still don't have all of the tools we need, particularly on the biology side, to capture all of the data we want or need. And the tools that we have, the machine learning tools, are just starting to evolve there too. Those are moving really rapidly, but I would say, from my perspective, we're just at the beginning of this journey. And I do think over time there will be drugs and observations that we find that will really help in terms of drug discovery and help in terms of helping patients in the end. And that's why I joined Insitro. But I think it's going to take a long time. I think we're just at the start of this. And I think everybody is impatient. Humans are impatient.
Humans are impatient. I also think humans are sometimes unrealistic about what it takes to get a drug all the way to market, right? It's not as though it falls out of one of your screens and then, next year it's on the market, which reminds me to ask, in pharma, the expression people love is fail fast, right? Figure out what's not going to work and move on. And I guess I have the perception that we're sort of moving from a period, at least in neuroscience, where we were target constrained to a period when we almost have too many options, too many targets, and the limitation is going to be the human studies and the bottleneck might shift. Curious if you think that, as someone who does neuroscience in part, if that's true. And I guess as a follow-up, how much do you guys worry about too many false positives, that you're going to sort of be swamped with things that need to go into animal or human?
Yeah, I worry about that problem a lot. And I agree with you. Because of human genetics, because of all of the technologies that have been developed, we have quite a few targets in terms of the neuroscience space. And it's really weeding those targets out, which is so important. I think we've really tried in the neuroscience group at Insitro and tried at Insitro in general to build an engine to weed those things out, to kind of cut down on the number of false positives so that we don't have to push everything into animals and into humans. But I think that's a very hard problem. And I'd say, I think we're doing maybe a little bit better there than pharma in terms of the tools that we've generated to weed out those things. But time will tell. We have a pretty big pipeline now at Insitro in terms of our neuroscience portfolio and our metabolic portfolio. And, we're just starting to go into the clinic. We're going to go into the clinic next year with a metabolic disease, and then hopefully the following year with neuroscience. And so we're just kind of starting this. And so you need to look at all the things and determine how things fall out over time to really understand the wholeness of your question. But we hope that all of the machine learning and the tools that we've built helps us weed out these things and really helps us develop better targets and better drugs. And that's really part of the thesis of Insitro, is to actually be able to do that. But it's a long-term thing.
So setting aside your corporate hat for a second, you are a scientist who works with AI. And so I have to ask you about AI scientists, because they have certainly gotten a lot of attention as potentially doing much of what human scientists traditionally did.
Yep.
And as someone who works at that interface, I'm sort of curious, are you bullish on AI scientists? Or are you skeptical, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm pretty much in between. I think there's some value in AI scientists. A lot of the agents that are out there can be very helpful, but there's still not a level of rigor and trust in these AI scientists that, one could actually believe without having a human in the loop to look at what's been done. We are using a lot of these agents now at Insitro for target discovery, and you always have to have a human fact check everything and think through, hey, does this really make sense? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. I think these things will get better over time, but without something like super intelligence or being able to fact check everything, you really still need a biologist in the loop. And so I don't see the jobs of biologists going away anytime soon, being replaced by an AI scientist or an agent. I think things like coding is completely man-made. Coding, you can go to, ChatGPT, or you can go to Anthropic's Claude, and actually it will code very well for you. Like, I use it now to vibe code, and that actually really has enabled me. So that's where I see the real advancements right now, is to more enable scientists like myself who are trained as biologists. I don't see it replacing us anytime soon.
So speaking of replacing us, you alluded at the beginning to the importance of getting the biologists and the informatics folks, the machine learning folks, either in the same person or at least at the same table. I think some of the people who listen to this program are interested, a lot of, for example, PhD students in, I do AI, I want to work in drug discovery, or I work in drug discovery and I want to start to move into AI. Who do you look for to hire? And what do you think people earlier in their careers, PhD students, postdocs, what should they be thinking about if they want to do the kinds of things that you are doing at Insitro?
More and more people are being trained from the start in quantitative sciences, in data science and biology together. And I would say, if I was a junior person, looking to get a PhD, I would be looking to kind of have that really cross-functional training so that, you're really kind of a hybrid individual from the beginning. If you're not doing that, I would say look for places where these skill sets are integrated. And there are multiple companies out there like Insitro where people are really trying to integrate these different fields, and look for the right culture where that's a central part of the culture so that you can continue to learn. Like, you want to go to a place that, has a learning culture, which, really supports people exchanging ideas and working together on challenging projects. And that's something that I really think is a cultural thing. So I would just advise, if you can get that training in both areas, if that's not where you're at, then look for places that actually support that kind of culture.
Makes a lot of sense. Ajamete Kaykas, thank you for talking with us today about Insitro and about your thoughts about science and drug discovery as it relates to AI. To our listeners, you can learn more about Insitro and this kind of work in today's episode notes online. To follow this and other JAMA Network podcasts, you can visit us online at jamanetworkaudio.com or search for JAMA Network wherever you get your podcasts. This episode was produced by Daniel Musisi at the JAMA Network.
This content is protected by copyright by the American Medical Association with all rights reserved, including those for text and data mining, AI training, and similar technologies.